Matt and Friends Drink the Universe is proudly sponsored by the Poppins Travel Company. Whether you're traveling across the universe like us or right here on planet Earth, it's always a good idea to have an expert to help you plan your trip. For your travel experts, look no further than the Poppins Travel Company. They'll help you book your next adventure or vacation, and the best part is they'll do your travel planning for free. To schedule a virtual appointment with one of their highly qualified travel agents, visit their website, www.poppistravelcompany.com. That's www.poppistravelcompany.com, or call them at 407-494-4070. That's 407-494-4070. Hello, listeners. We're all here to have fun.
But we'd like to take a moment to encourage you to always drink responsibly.
Never drink and drive.
If you have a complicated relationship with alcohol or other substances and you want to talk about it,
you can call 1-800-662-4357 for support.
Thank you for listening.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff.
Welcome to Matt and Friends Drink the Universe!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Matt and Friends Drink the Universe. I'm here today at Invertase Brewery in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and joining me, I have a very special guest,
Steve Zolnay.
Hi, Steve. Thank you very much for joining us. And also,
I thought I was the special guest today.
Special, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very special.
Hi, everybody. It's Rob.
So Steve has graciously asked us to come and visit today, which we deeply appreciate. He has some beers ready for us. And I'm excited because he has some cue cards on the other side of the table for different stories that he has. But I want to start off asking you about the brewery, your journey, where the name came from.
No problem. And thanks for coming and hanging out with us for the day.
Thank you again for having us.
So when my son was 14 years old, for Father's Day, he got me a beer kit, the requisite box of misery. And we went and made a horrific mess in the kitchen. My wife was pretty upset. And it was the worst beer we ever could imagine. But we continued to brew through his high school years and into college. And he was starting to put up some pretty good beers. We actually put him in one of the big Keystone events, and he thought he was the dude and was going to crush everybody. He did very well. And unfortunately, he didn't win, which really irritated him. And he went dark. And after about 2 months of doing a lot of studying, the first beer that came out was the predecessor to our Hazy New England 1954, which is now half of our business, day, week, month, and year. But he went on to college. I got an engineering degree. And then when he graduated, he was working as a design engineer for 5 years. And one day he looked down the cubicles and said, yep, when I'm 57, I'm going to be the vice president. So he picked up the phone and called me and said, Dad, let's talk about a brewery. 6 months later, we started swinging hammers in Phillipsburg, and we built out a brewery for ourselves.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. And you had a fun story you shared with me about the building here while we were setting up. But is the 1954 on the table here?
1954 is on the table. If you lift up one of the glasses, it's a Hazy. You'll see it marked out.
Top right.
Top right.
That's your left.
That's it.
Oh, no.
No, we're
It's
off
gonna be
to
a
a good
long
start.
day, Matthew.
All right. So,
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, Steve.
Cheers. Thank you.
That's a good beer.
Yeah, it is. Very solid IPA.
Yep. Thank you. We do have a few IPAs on. We don't want to be known as an IPA house, but we generally have at least 2, maybe 3. Currently, we have 3 on there. 1954, which is a Hazy New England, and then we've got Arithmophobia, which is the fear of math and numbers. And then we have Misplaced References, which is a double IPA.
I think I have arithmophobia. Do I have that, Rob?
I believe you do.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm checking this in because it's delicious.
You're untapping it? Untapping?
Yes. A very respectable 3.85 with over 1,500 ratings on this beer.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, Invertase, where did first of all, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Good.
We get all sorts of derivations that just grind our teeth. But yes, invertase is the first enzyme in the beer making process. It splits the sugars so that the yeast can eat and turn sugar into alcohol. I'm a biochemist by training. I worked in pharma for 20 years, so I chose that name. And when you put that as your website domain, it's brilliant because nobody is using that. You can misspell Invertase and we still come up on our top 5 hits.
Wow.
So we have a plethora of wacky sound drops, but that's going to get one of these.
Science. I'm a biologist by trade as well. I work in pharma currently, so
Nice.
I find beer science to be very cool.
Oh, and when scientists come into the brewery and they start to see our mass specs on the wall and our tissue culture hoods, and they start jumping up and down like little kids, so it's a lot of fun.
He's looking around like, where?
Yep. It's over on the other side. So I'm a biochemist. My wife is a microbiologist, and as I mentioned, my son is the brewmaster is a mechanical engineer.
Very cool.
Very cool. And you said your wife is related to
Isaac Newton.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There you go.
Where's the apple? Yeah, you should have brought one. We could have dropped it.
Well, no, my comment before was the gravity of that statement.
Yeah.
Oh, what? God. That's a reach.
So Isaac Newton did not have any children, but his brother, that line is run there. So my wife is a distant cousin to Isaac Newton.
Cool.
Wow.
And how long have you been here at this location?
5.5 years. And we are opening a second location in a few months in Lambertville.
I'm really happy that I discovered Invertase fairly recently. I think we started talking about 2 months ago. My friend Andy Miller and I, who's been on the podcast before, were looking for a place to go. We wanted to just try something new. And he said, hey, how about Invertase? And we ended up here and we got to try a couple really good ones. I'm a big fan of the Belgian triple that's up there as well. So is that down here by chance?
Yes, I put that on there for you. And that is my dinner Sunday night because, Sunday is my Friday night. We work, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So when we go home, I bring home a 4-pack of triple. And it pairs very well with a brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tart, just as a side note.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
There you go.
Did you find
Top
it?
left, Matthew.
Top left.
There
All
you
right.
go.
I went to the left that time.
Cheers.
I would say we don't have to clink every time.
Oh.
I had that one when I was here before, and I bought a 4-pack to leave. I think I had 2 of them when I were here. Just phenomenal.
Thank you.
It's giving me a little bit of like I don't know if it's because I just had this one before, but it's giving me a little bit of like a kettle sour note.
A little bit.
Just a teens, which I love sours. So I like this very much.
I'm going to hit the button. Should I hit the button? I want to hit the button.
Stellar Sip.
That's a very good beer.
So the reason that the Belgian triple is on there is, number one, I like Belgians, so I wanted to have that on there. Secondly, that is a beer that you can't hide your sins behind hops, so you actually have to do a good job on that. And the other point for it was as an homage to Weyerbacher, because the first conversation we had was at Weyerbacher, and we were drinking Mary Monk's. So we're kind of an homage to the local godfather of the area.
I appreciate that. Mary Monks has definitely come up on the podcast before, speaking from Nazareth, right up the road from Easton. I appreciate the homage for sure. Steve has brought some cue cards with some stories that he's accumulated from over the years. Rob, why don't you reach in there, pull one out?
Is that what I'm going to do?
That's what you're going to do. There you go.
That's how we're going to do it?
I'm excited for
I'm just
this.
going to go in the middle. Ooh, no beer. I don't know if we want to talk about that. That makes me sad.
Good story. Very good story. So our roles in the organization, my son is the brewer, my wife manages the events and activities, and I kind of run the front of the group. And I go around and I talk to people, and everybody has all sorts of interesting stories and anecdotes, and I kind of collect them in my head. A real cool thing happened the first summer of the pandemic. We got a phone call from this band saying, hey, we want to come play at your brewery. And so my wife's responsible for that, so she kind of went and looked it up, and she was going through it, and I'm sitting across from her on a laptop, and she kind of turns pale, and she goes, I go, wait, what's the matter? She says, they are famous. I said, what do you mean by famous? And she goes, well, they have 7 albums. They're a country western band, and
wow.
they have a Greyhound bus that's pimped out with murals and cow horns on the front, and they do the whole South by Southwest circuit. And I said, yo, we'd love to get them. She says, okay. So I picked up the phone, I called them and said, we'd really like you to come here, but how much money do you want? And they're locally based here in New Jersey. He said, we haven't played in 6 months. We'll do it for $400. And I said, okay. So we got a food truck and we advertised and stuff, and they rolled in that afternoon. It was a beautiful sunny Saturday during the summer, and they unloaded all their gear and they just played. They played their own music and all the other country western hits, and you couldn't tell the difference. And this place got so crowded and word got out that 4 more food trucks showed up. We had a food blogger show up. He was chugging meatballs. There was in the parking lot. This place was overrun. I'm sure the fire marshal was probably cringing given the number of people inside and out of this building. By 6 o'clock, the only beer we had left was stout, and the whole brewery was sticky and insane. And that was probably the most money we ever made in a single day. And the next morning, people were banging on our doors, and we had to be closed because we literally had no beer at all. We had stuff in the tanks, but they weren't ready. They drank our entire brewery dry in one afternoon.
Oh, wow.
God bless AJ.
What band was that?
It's AJ Croying, the Devil's Right-Hand Band.
Okay. Yep.
Do you know who it is?
No.
Okay.
But I don't listen to country music, so that's not a shock to me.
Yeah, now that you say that, not necessarily a shock to me either. I have to look them up, though.
No,
That's
the
really
shock
cool.
was I was so excited. I asked, "Can I come on the tour bus?" And he said, "Yeah." So I went in there, and they have all sorts of cool stuff in there. And then I got off the bus, and I turned to my wife and said, "Hey, hon, you should go check out the tour bus." And she said, "Yeah." And she ran up on the bus, and I'm like, "Wait a minute! I just told my wife to go on the tour bus by herself." But yeah, they were super nice people, and they've played several times here, and really nice. We have a photo of them on the wall on the back corner.
Well, that's cool. I'll have to go check that out.
Very cool. Very cool.
So that's AJ.
That's AJ.
All right, your turn, Matt. You gotta
All right.
draw a card.
All right. We got Big Fuss.
Big Fuss. Okay, so Big Fuss is an 80s cover band. They're kind of based out of Washington, Clinton area. Super nice guys. Before we even opened, they started harassing us by email saying, "Hey, we're a really good band. You got to come." And we were nervous and new. We didn't know what was a good band and a bad band, but they just worked us and worked us and worked us. And finally, we gave up and said, "Okay, come. We'll bite the bullet. We'll pay for your gig to be here and play." And they played long and well and drew a big crowd. And they come 3 times a year, and we started joking that they were kind of the house band for us. And one day I was driving up to work, and I was listening to the Philly radio station, and they were talking about Victory Brewing, and they did a collab with Styx, and they made a beer named after them called Oh Mama. And I was thinking to myself, hey, I'm a brewery. I can do this. So I called James from the Big Fuss, and I said, "Did you hear about that Victory thing?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool." I said, "Do you have a beer named after you?" He was like, "What?" So they came to this table. We invited them all to this table, and my son sat down with them and said, "Okay, tell me what your dream beer will be, and we'll make it for you." So they talked, and they were like freaking out. I go, "Oh my God, we're just a shitty bar band. What the heck is this?" So Steve and my son made the beer for them, and we all on the beer opening, which we do in April, which is coming up in a week or so, we always have the Big Fuss Band beer on tap. And we made a label for them, and they signed the label, and it's hanging on the wall. And they are the best and most loyal band that we get, and they do a great job here. So shout out to the Big Fuss.
What kind
really
of
cool.
What kind of beer is it?
It's a Hazy New England.
The Hazy New England?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I aspire to have a beer named after us one day. That would be cool.
We can work on it.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh. You want to pick one?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I want to pick one more beer. I'm flying through these beers. They're too good for the morning.
Breakfast beers. Way to give it away.
That's okay.
All of our drinking is done responsibly after noon.
No, it is not.
No, if you listen to the early episodes, we're recording at 9 a.m.
Train Man.
Train Man, awesome. So it was a beautiful fall day, and the outside beer garden was bumping, and there were people inside. And all of a sudden, this guy wearing a one of those reflective vests, green reflective vest, is standing in front of my taps, and kind of nervously. And I said, "Everything okay?" He goes, no, I just need a 4-pack. And given on his nervousness, he also had a walkie-talkie on his thing. I went and looked out the back door, and I see a freight train with 100 freight cars, and it stopped. And I look at him and I go, is that your train? And he goes, yeah. And I said, what's going on? He says, I live out in western Pennsylvania, and my wife mapped out the route and said, why don't you pick up some beer? So he jumped the fence, ran in, grabbed the 4-pack. So,
that is incredible.
But I told him, I said, dude, you're in trouble. He says, why am I in trouble? He says, I said, the trains are all GPSed, and that means they know you stopped. And he just held up his phone and showed me the safety alert, debris on track.
He had his bases covered.
He did. He blew the whistle and took off. 3 weeks later, he's standing in my tap room again. I said, dude, text me. And he says, no, I just like jumping the fence. and a year later, I go out and there's 2 women sitting at the same table. And I sat down and talked with them. And they said, it was really weird. This guy jumped the fence, stopped his train and jumped the fence. And I said, that's my story. He says, no, we seen him first. So sometimes he drives by, honks and waves and keeps going. Sometimes he stops and gets beer from us. So
That's pretty cool.
And he's from Western Pennsylvania?
yeah, I won't tell you where because I don't want him to lose his job.
I hope that you only know him as Train Man.
That's right.
Because,
Yep.
you got to protect the identities.
I'm cheating in here. I am.
Of course
I'm
you're cheating.
curious. I'm curious about Greg here. It's that first name on the list there.
You got to back up and get to Eric first, though.
I gotta get to Eric
You
first.
got to get to Eric.
We're going to do Eric before Greg.
You might want to hold that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're dipping into some musicians. So
Yes.
my wife has really good musical ability, and my son is a drummer, and he's a fantastic drummer. He actually sits in on some of the bands, and it pisses off the drummer when they do it because he's sometimes better than them.
So duly noted. I'm not going to pick up sticks near Steve, apparently.
And there's a drum kit in his office as well, so he does wail on it from time to time. But I have no musical experience whatsoever. I'm literally a moron in that space. So when music comes together, it's very magical. So I really enjoy that when that happens. So we were working with the town of Clinton, and it turns out that ELO, members of the ELO band, because ELO split up into Jeff Lynne, who is the voice of ELO, and the rest of the band hates Jeff. So they created, there's 2 entities. One is Jeff, and the other is the orchestra, which is formerly the guys from ELO.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was able to find the wife of one of the bandmates, Eric, and because she's into animals and all sorts of holistic things, and we have goats at our house, I said I could use this as a hook to get her down to my place. And I said, oh, and bring your husband. So they came down and they were hanging out at our in our barns playing with the baby goats. And then Eric goes, oh wait, I got to take this phone call. And he walks away. And then he comes back and I said, who are you talking to? And he just holds up his phone and the words were Paul. And I go, are we talking about the Paul? He goes, yeah. I said, why are you talking to Paul? And he says, well, I was working with John just before he passed because he was working on some songs together. And Paul called me because he wants to rebuild those songs and put them out. So the songs that came out last year was a collaboration between Eric and Paul McCartney.
Unbelievable.
Rob's brain just melted. That's mine too. As a
Yeah,
musician,
we're music people, so that's pretty incredible.
So we've become friends, and he's been over to my house a few times and with his wife. And one time he showed up, and I said, hey, Eric, I got a present for you. And he's like, oh, yeah, what is it? And I handed him a 50-pound sack of goat poop. And he goes, well, that's weird. And I said, Eric, you're a vegetarian. I know you have a garden, and this is good shit. And so I put we carried the goat poop to his trunk and put it in there, and he's like, yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And then he was kind of standing there for a minute thinking, and he goes, hey, we have an event coming up. We're doing a concert. You want backstage passes? So I traded 50 pounds of goat poop for 2 backstage passes
Wow.
to an ELO concert. So,
Wow.
So
That's
now-
really cool.
all right, so now we'll talk about Greg. So
All right. Before we hop into that, I was going to grab. Is this the misplaced? That's over here on the left.
Yep, that's the double New England.
What, double?
Double.
You know, I try not to get stuck on IPAs because I feel like they're overdone a lot. But I am an IPA boy through and through, and this is delicious. It's almost giving me creamsicle, orange creamsicle.
I taste it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's very tasty.
See, when we get quiet, it's because we like what we're drinking, and we're just...
Is that button worthy?
Is that one's button worthy?
Oh, absolutely.
That one's button worthy.
Stellar Sip.
All right, so you want to talk about Greg?
Yeah.
So Greg Smith is a famous musician. He worked with Ted Nugent for 7 years. He also worked with Blue Oyster Cult, Alice Cooper, and Billy Joel. He is a phenomenal musician, and he lives in the hills around here. And for 2.5 years, I shaved my legs and I wore lipstick trying to hunt him down. And it worked. So he came to play in our brewery. He's been here a couple times now. He's on touring bands and he's on the road a lot. But when he's not, he's local and he can pop in. So he usually brings a drummer and a guitarist. But we're talking top flight musicians.
Sure.
And they just wailed. And one of the coolest things, they were out back playing in our bandstand. And one of the songs was winding down. And he leans in to the guitarist and they start talking while they're still playing as the song's winding down, and all of a sudden it becomes another song, and then 2 minutes later he leans back in and it goes back and forth, and 5 songs were played seamlessly. And after Greg came down and I said, what was going on? He says, well, we were playing a song in the key of E, and I reached into my guitarist. I said, you got a song in the key of E? He goes, yeah, I got a Rolling Stone song. So instantly it became a Rolling Stone song.
Yeah.
And then another song, and back and forth, and ended up with Eagles song, New Kid in Town.
It's funny how mathematical music can become, and if you know the connections, how easy it is to kind of just streamline things together. It's a stroke of genius too. Like when professionals can just do this stuff like that.
Absolutely. And my son, who's a drummer, he goes out and checks the bands when they play, and he usually listens to a song or two, and he goes, they're okay. But then when these guys were playing, he stayed on the fence for the entire concert going, oh my God, these guys are good.
Yeah, I just watched a documentary on Amazon Prime called Guns for Hire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it talks maybe directly about Greg Smith, because it talks about all these guys who have, been backline people for all these big famous people, whether it be Ted Nugent or Billy Joel or whatever, and how it can all end in an instant for these guys. That they're just there for the tour.
Yep.
And then afterwards, they're moving on and doing their own thing. But it was a really cool documentary.
So Greg ended up doing the Billy Joel Broadway show. So he was the bass player, and it was a good long-running show. So they were there, all the time. And afterwards, every night when they were done, they'd walk a couple blocks down to an Irish bar and have a few beers before heading home. So they got to know the bartender. And one night, they all stepped out, and this guy comes running up behind to Greg and goes, "Hey, Greg, can I come hang out with you guys tonight?" And Greg goes, "Sure thing, Mr. Patrick Swayze." And
Wow.
so they go into the bar, and the bartender goes, "Greg, do you know Patrick?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's my friend."
Oh,
That's crazy.
So the final bit with Greg was after one of his shows, we were just hanging out talking, and I mentioned the story about the goat poop to Eric, and Greg goes, I got a garden that my tomatoes just aren't working. He says, I want to get in on this goat shit, okay? Can you hook me up? So,
the major supplier of fertilizer.
I think you guys need a beer called Goat Poop.
You might.
A porter, it's like something dark.
There you go.
I think that'd be hilarious.
A nut brown ale, if you will.
and then people are curious if you're adding it as an ingredient or not.
Oh, no. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I got to see Greg perform last time I was here.
Yep.
Yeah. It was Andy and I walked in, and he goes, hey, this guy that's been like with Blue Oyster Cult and all these other bands is going to play. And I kind of looked and went, really? And he got up on stage, phenomenal.
Shredded.
Just
Everything,
absolutely
yeah.
phenomenal.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one of those life experience. For me, beer and music go together. They are two things that just go together. They clearly go together.
It's complementing.
Yeah. Go together very well here at Invertase. And to walk into that was just one of those life experiences I did not expect that to occur at all that afternoon. It was very cool.
All right, I'm going to pull this story, please.
Oh, Martin guitar.
Yeah, this is near and dear to my heart. I always wanted a Martin guitar my whole life growing up in the Lehigh Valley, and I own 3 of them now, so
Nice.
I'm happy to say it's a dream come true, right?
Yep.
Yeah. A couple times for you. Right.
So
we're sorry, I didn't want to cut Steve off, but we're looking through here, and Rob and I have now stopped just randomly picking, and we're looking for the things that are like, yes,
we're cherry
that
picking from the
one.
pile now.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah.
All right, so Martin guitar, again, back to the whole fact that music is magical to me. We do music trivia on Sundays. My son and I do it, and we have a lot of fun. He's pretty serious, and I harass him, and then I come down and I harass everybody that's playing, and it's a lot of fun, and it's actually a real good anchor on Sunday night. There were 2 couples that come kind of regularly, and I was talking to one of them. His name's Matt. I said, "What do you do for work?" He says, I work at Martin Guitar. I said, "Sweeping the floor?" He goes, No. I actually make high-end guitars. I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he says, famous musicians and stuff like that and wealthy people. I said, "Oh, that's cool." So we wrapped up, and then a couple weeks later he showed up, and I said, "So how was work this week?" And he goes, "Oh, John Mayer, he's not fun to work with. He's very difficult, but he makes really good music." But yeah, then he says, but then Eric Clapton, yeah, he's kind of frustrating because he wants to make this monster guitar, but his hands are kind of small, so I'm gonna have to keep making reworks. But James Taylor was pretty cool, and I said, dude, did you just drop 3 names, big names on me? He's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, that's cool." So then he left, and then about a month later, he comes back and he's all on Twitter. And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I've been working on a project for 6 months. These 2 women reached out to me to build a guitar, and it's a complicated guitar. So this went on for 6 months, and we had meetings every week. We'd have Zoom calls. I'd be sending diagrams back and forth and back and forth. And finally, after 6 months, it was done. So I picked the phone and I called them, and I said, "It's done. Where do you want me to mail it?" And they said, "Matt, we really enjoyed working with you. I mean, it was a pleasure to work with you. We're going to drive to Martin Guitar and pick it up personally." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool." So they set the date, and everything was great. And day of, the 2 women got out of the car, walked into reception, and the reception like this went, "Holy cow." And she immediately called all the VIPs, and they all flooded down there, and they're all jumping up and down, going, "Oh, my God," and talking to them. And finally, one of the women goes, "Which one of you is Matt?" And they go, "None of us are Matt." And they said, "We don't want to talk to you. Can you get Matt?" So the VP picks up the phone and calls Matt and says, "Can you come down here?" And Matt comes down. Here's the big reveal. He goes, "And Nancy from Heart."
Heart. Yeah, when you said 2 women, I immediately thought Heart.
He's
Yeah,
like,
that's
"What the hell?" He's like, they're chatting and stuff like that. And then Nancy says, "Matt, remember like 3 months ago on one of our calls, you mentioned that you were in an 80s cover band?" And he's like, "Man, you remember that? And you came here and you mentioned it to me?" He's, "Oh, thank you so much. That was so cool." And with that, there was a smile on her face. She reaches from around back and she puts the Barracuda guitar down on the table, looks at him and says, "Play it, bitch."
Oh my God.
He's playing her guitar, her song to them as close as you and I are together.
Wow,
He's like,
that's so cool.
tears running down his face. He's like, "Ah." And then eventually he was done, and they hung out for 20 minutes just talking about music and Crime of the Century. And he says, "I can survive all the John Mayers and Eric Claptons for just 20 minutes with Ann and Nancy." It was just phenomenal.
I grew up knowing Martin Guitar was in Nazareth, and it was a big deal. It wasn't until I got significantly older and much more into music that I realized how much of a big deal Martin Guitar actually is. Now, I'm going to pick one here, and I'm going to show Rob the name of it.
Okay.
And he will appreciate why I picked Lactose Funeral. Anybody that's known me for a long time knows that earlier in my life, Lactose and I were not friends. I've been much better the last 10 years or so.
So I can hold my breath for 34 minutes. And the reason is, so it was a Sunday, it was music trivia, it was nice summer night, and we were about 20 minutes to closing hours, thank God. 3 women come in, and you could tell immediately, they were dressed nicely in kind of dark dresses, and they had not been there, and they didn't know anything about craft beer. And I said, "Can I help you?" He says, we need alcohol. And I said, everything okay? He says,
Been there.
we just came from a funeral. And I was like, oh, I said, okay. So we kind of walked them through and so forth. And then they went and sat down. And about 10 minutes later, one of my regulars walks into the ladies' room, and then she comes flying out, and she goes, close it down. And I said, uh-oh. So I come around, and I go in, and apparently they were not familiar with lactose, and one of them was lactose intolerant.
Oh, no.
So I went into the first stall. She tried to make it, but she couldn't get the dress up fast enough. So the splatter was on the wall, down across the entire seat. And I could tell that she changed to the other stall from the brown footprints.
No.
And when I came out, I noticed that there were two women guarding the men's room, and there was probably that woman in there trying to clean up. And they kind of scurried and disappeared away. So I closed off the bathroom, and after everyone left, I held my breath for 34 minutes, and I cleaned the entire bathroom.
Steve, I got a special button for this one.
Oh, no.
Oh,
So
did you burn your bathrooms? I'm just curious. Did you just throw a stick of dynamite in there and call it? Yeah, we really enjoyed having those. We'll build one next door.
I actually told my son had left, and I called him. I said, tomorrow morning, can you do a spot check? And he says, yeah, you missed a few. But on the way home, I reached out to Chuck from Jersey Girl because I needed to get this off my chest because I just can't hold this on me all by myself. So I called Chuck, and I told him the whole story. And he goes, yeah, well, I've got a similar one where a guy had ate a lot of food and then threw up into the men's urinal, which is a picking job. So we've decided we're tied right now, and we're waiting for one of us to actually be the winner of this event.
Well, I hope you don't win
I don't want to win.
for your sake. All right, Matt, do we want to move before the next story? Do we want to move on to Fox or Tranquility?
You pick.
All right, we're going to go with the Fox.
All right.
I guess. This is a Bohemian Pilsner.
And
Mama.
we put this on because occasionally we do private events, and if you get older people that say, I just want a regular beer. So we built the Pilsner.
This is beer-flavored beer.
Yeah, it is a regular beer, and we move a lot of it. And
Well, it's good, though.
police officers really enjoy it. They're good beer drinkers, but corrections officers are the best beer drinkers we know.
Okay.
Love that.
Yep.
This, as Rob said, beer-flavored beer. I love Pilsner. So Rob is an IPA boy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a stout, Belgian, Pilsner, not necessarily an IPA boy. This is ticking all the boxes for me. So you're going 3 for 3 here.
Stellar
We're on the
Sip.
fourth one, Math Man.
I didn't hit it for the first. I'm sorry, I didn't hit it. Fine. There you
Okay,
go.
there you go.
We're circling back.
Stellar Sip.
I haven't had a bad beer yet. I'll say that. I'll be honest, that one went down the fastest.
It's an easy drinker. That one's crushable.
You know,
that
it-
one you could
it
you could
really
have several
reminds
of those
me-
and not get full.
It actually reminds me a lot of Munich.
Yeah.
You know, I've been to Germany a couple of times, and you know, they just make solid beer there. You know, and there's no frills to it. They're not trying to make it taste like Cinnamon Toast Crunch or anything like some breweries do. And like, there's a space for that, right? But I could have 8 of those.
Yep, and
You know?
my son sources all the ingredients from Germany and from the Czech Republic.
Okay.
And we had 2 guys that were they do the Switzerland, Zurich to Newark flight. They're the pilots, and they stopped in here because they were on a layover, and they immediately went to the Pilsner, and they sat down and they were speaking German, and they told me their story, and they looked at me and said, "You could put this in any German beer hall, and they would not know the difference." So yeah, he's true to that. You know,
Yeah, we actually did. We have these short episodes we call Alcohology, where we try to like be more informative than silly and funny and whatnot. And we did one about the Reinheitsgebot, which is like the German beer purity law, which is pretty interesting if you think about it in today's, you know, culture and everything. You know, you're what, 500 years from when it was established, and people in Germany especially are still abiding by this and staying true, and you've got recipes there that have been the same for hundreds of years. I like to drink history.
So I know that you said your son, Steve, who's the brewmaster,
Yep.
is very meticulous in how he puts things together. And that's really coming through for me in the beers that we're drinking right now.
I agree. I'm going to move on to this card because I am interested in this story.
Oh, Lordy, the ghost story.
The ghost
He already
story.
talked about Patrick Swayze.
No, wrong ghost.
Wrong
wow.
ghost.
Oh, hey, that was actually a good one.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
See?
So ghost story. So early on when we were building, we were doing a lot of late night stuff, and my son was really putting in a lot of hours building out the brewery, and he noticed that there was like some weird stuff going on here in the brewery, and he mentioned to me, he says, "I think we got a ghost here," and I said, "Yeah, there's no ghost here." But he to ward off any fears, he would just throw his hands up in the air at night and say, "Okay, Mr. Ghost, do whatever you want, but clean up your crap by morning." So I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." And then occasionally we would have customers out in the beer garden going, "Hey, I think I've seen a ghost." Normally when it's really late and they're really hammered. And I said, "Yo, okay, that's probably a good plan that you noticed that there's a ghost there." But there was a woman, one of our regulars that comes here, and she claims that she's a medium. And I said, "Well, do you think we have any ghosts here?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, you do have a ghost here." And I said, "Really? Tell me more." She says, "Well, actually, he doesn't live in the brewery. He actually lives outside in the beer garden, and he's a Native American adolescent, like late teens." I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah, and he's not evil, but he is interested in your son and kind of follows around with him every now and then." And I said, "Yeah, okay, sure, if you say so." So this went on, and one night we had a real big event, and I was the last one to leave, and I shut everything down, locked all the doors, and I was cleaning up. And I went into the cold box, which we have plastic over there so that the cold doesn't blow out. And I was in there, and all of a sudden something flickered past, and I said, "That's weird. I thought everybody was out of here." And then all of a sudden, all the hair on my arms just went up, and I said, "Uh-oh, ghost." So I stepped out, closed the door, locked up, put on the security, and went out, and I picked up my phone, and I called my son. I said, "Hey, I think I seen your ghost tonight." And he goes, "Oh, in front of the cold box?" And I went, "No."
Oh, no.
So,
Oh, no.
yeah, so
Exactly
confirmed,
Wow.
right to the spot. So occasionally we do see.
That's
and
neat.
Mostly with him, rarely with me, but yeah.
So I'll say this. For a number of years, I did amateur ghost hunting. As a man of science, I find it incredibly intriguing to experience things that I can't explain and can't come up with like a scientific explanation for. And over the years, we've gone to plenty of places, and most of the time it's like, oh well, like we think that you might have a gas leak, and maybe you're having some hallucinations because we're smelling that methane smell or whatever. Or we see that you live in an old house and there's old wiring, and the electromagnetic field can probably make you have some hallucinations or the feeling of dread or whatever. So like that's all well and good, but then when you have an experience and you can't find a why, I'm so intrigued by that. I have no idea what it means. What does it all mean?
I've seen you possessed by spirits on several occasions.
Oh, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
You could have thrown that one right back at me very easily.
That's fair. That's
very
fair.
easily.
That's fair.
All right, I'm here between insurance agent and pro wrestling.
Insurance agent, yes.
Insurance agent?
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Normally,
never would I ever think that insurance would be more exciting than a pro wrestling story, but
No.
let's go with it.
Oh, wait. I think I know. I think you mentioned this to me before, at least part of it, because I'm looking at the subtext there. The first time we met, I think you might have mentioned a story about this to me.
Yeah. So I go around and I talk to people, and I thoroughly enjoy it and meet all sorts of stories. So there was a woman that came in with some friends, and I said, "So what do you do for work?" She goes, I'm in insurance. I said, "Are you like risk analysis internally? Are you out there on the streets, dead bodies and cars and stuff?" She says, No. I insure talent." And I said, "What does that mean?" She says, "I have a portfolio of 3 people that are very valuable, and I have to be with them when they do what they need to do." And I said, "Okay, please explain a little bit more." She goes, "I have 3 people that are musicians, and when they go and play, I have to travel with them, and I have to watch the setup and the takedown of all the equipment, and I have to make sure that my talent is safe and healthy and so forth." I said, okay, do tell. So in order, she says, he's a really nice guy, and he's very particular, and he's good, and I enjoy working with him. His name is Sting. So she has to hang out with Sting backstage.
Wait, hang on one second. Is this the pro wrestler Sting?
This is Sting.
I'm joking.
I'm sure there are concerns there as well, but
So she enjoys working with Sting, and he's very good and very on point. She says her favorite one is Dave Matthews, because they just hang out together and they talk for hours watching the crew set up and take down. She says this is just a lot of fun to hang out with Dave Matthews.
Wow.
And I said, okay, so who's number one? Because we're talking top flight here. He goes, Bruce Springsteen is my other one.
Wow.
so she has a small portfolio.
Small portfolio
Okay.
of 3 musicians.
Just 3.
Just 3. But so she did mention that because Bruce's daughter is into equestrian down in Colts Neck, and they were going up to upstate New York to do an equestrian event. And turns out that this insurance agent actually lives up there. And she said, Bruce, don't stay at a hotel, because there's going to be fans and paparazzi and all that and something like that. Just stay at my house, and you can sleep over there, and so you won't be bothered. And he said, yeah. So he ended up hanging out and sleeping at her house.
That's so wild.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, man, sitting there at the kitchen table and seeing Bruce Springsteen come down in floppy slippers and an overcoat, and just the song in the back of my head, Tramps Like Us, Baby, It's Born to Run.
Wow. I am flabbergasted.
That's her job. That's a tough job.
You had told me, actually, and this was the story that when I started talking to Steve, when I was sitting here having a beer, that I said, Steve is my people. I need to have Steve on the podcast. You told me the story about a sax player, I believe, that came in.
Yes, the sax player. So
Yeah.
it was a rainy November, and this guy came in and he sat down at a table and he's sipping on a beer. And I went over and sat with him, and I said, so what do you do for work? And he goes, I'm a musician. I said,
How many people say they do that for work? I'm just going to...
So he's sitting there, and I said, where are you from? He says, I'm local. And I said, oh, that's cool. So what do you do? He says, I'm a musician. I said, do you have a musical instrument, or do you just, sing in the bathroom? And he says, no, I play saxophone. And I go, are you in a band? And he goes, I'm in a Billy Joel cover band. And I go, yeah, saxophone, that works. I could see that working. And so we're chatting and talking, and my brain's spinning in the background. And I go, finally I turned to him, I said, dude, I don't think you can make enough money as a Billy Joel cover band sax player to pay the rent. And he goes, yeah, you're right. I'm in another band. And yeah, he's one of Bruce Springsteen's saxophone players.
Wow.
So Bruce has 6 of them, and he rotates based on availability, skill set, and whims. And so my guy, when he's not on stage, Bruce trusts him the most, and he puts him in the front row of Springsteen concerts so he could critique the show and go backstage and tell them how to improve on their music, which is pretty cool. He comes and visits occasionally, and we meet up every now and then at farmers markets and stuff, and he brings his dog, and we hang out and talk. And he's just flying below the radar. He's insanely famous, but nobody really notices. And I was talking to him about, we were having a band coming to play, and he said, who are they? And I said, it's these guys. And he says, oh, they're really good. You'll have a good show. And I said, you should come. He says, I can't. I have to be in Pittsburgh, and I have to go to Ohio this weekend. And I said, with Bruce? And he goes, yeah, sorry.
Well, Matt, I feel like this is a setup. I feel like you knew that this was going to be this type of a conversation. You didn't tell me anything about it.
I did, yeah.
And I'm so dumbfounded by all of it. I'm such a music nerd.
Yeah, Rob and I are both dying inside right now because like I said, when I met Steve and he told me a couple of these stories, I was like, no, you need to be on the podcast. We need to talk, and it's.
I think maybe 2 more stories and 1 more beer.
I think 2 more and 1 more beer is a
All
good
right,
way
so-
to go here, and then.
So
we'll
I'll
wrap up.
go with that because I think we already talked about Sting a little bit. So I'll leave Sting there. I mean, we might have to do a follow-up episode. Nobody knows.
We could.
Nobody
Very
knows.
possibly could.
And just real quick before you start there, Steve, I'm going to go with the Tranquility for our last beer here. And this is a Belgian wit. This is a style I enjoy.
Ooh, yes.
That's my wife. Bring that home tonight. Beer.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one you get the phone call for.
Yep.
I normally get the "Can you stop at Giant" or something like that on the way home. Rob is furiously adding things to Untapped as we're talking.
Oh yes, no, it's very important.
I must document.
Do you know about the problem with the military in Untapped?
No, I've never
do
heard
not.
about this.
So
I want to.
if a battalion moves to another air base or wherever, and then there's a bar and they do Untapped, they all go on there, and guess what? You can track troop movements on Untapped.
Oh,
That makes. I know they had that problem with people checking in on Facebook and
Yeah.
things like that. So that's like a big no-no.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a thing now. So you can see where troop deployments are going.
And probably what they like to drink, so you can greet them with their favorite beverage. Yeah,
This is a solid Belgian wit.
yeah. I was enjoying it so much I stopped talking about it, but it's creamy, velvety, goes down
I mean,
easy.
It's that classic like banana clove flavor that you get with a Belgian.
I will say too, Rob. So I had mentioned this. Rob and I had gone to Atlantic City Beer Festival last week, and one of the issue that we had at the end of the day was not that we were like tipsy out of control. We were full. I'm not having that problem right now. These are very. I don't even want to say light, but they're flavorful and they're not overly filling. You could have several of the beers here at Invertase.
Yeah, I don't feel like I've
yeah.
eaten 7 sandwiches, which
Exact-
is
yes,
how I
that's a
felt
good
at
way
the
to
beer
put it, yeah.
festival. You know, like
Yeah.
it's just carb, and although I do feel like I've had something, but it's again not light, but drinkable, crushable, even.
There you go.
Yeah.
Approachable. My son's mantra is approachable. That's so.
Yeah.
Yep.
He has achieved that. He has
Yeah.
definitely achieved that.
All right. So you handed me comedy.
Yes.
So a couple of years ago, an organization called Boston Comedy reached out and says, "Hey, do you want to do comedy at your brewery?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." So they bring 3 comics every second Friday of the month. Not during the summer because comics hate light. It has to be fall, winter, and early spring because they like darkness. So second Friday of every month, we host comedy here at the space on Friday nights, and they're kind of BB plus talent. They need more ring time, but they're good and they're polishing their craft, and it's great fun to work with them. Having done a year and a half, 2 years of these comedies, we gathered some stories, and 3 of the most notable here I'll bring up. The first one is referred to as pedophile. The the large customer area holds about 80 people, and we were packed to the gills, and it was dark, and the opener was up on the stage. She was a really good woman, and she was doing some pretty good jokes, and I was really excited, so I came around from the brewery side to take a picture of the crowds for Instagram. So, oh, look how famous and popular we are with all these laughing people. She caught the little bit of red in my shirt out of the corner of her eye, and she stopped her bit, and she slowly turned and looked at me with this evil grin that went right to the core of my being, going, "Oh, man, I'm in the wrong spot." And she launched into a 10-minute pedophile bit on me. It was horrific. I was not upset with her. I was impressed with her skill set, but the portfolio of things that she laid on me was horrific.
No.
It was so bad that customers were coming up to me to see if I was okay.
So
I would have been like,
I'm just
well, hey,
impressed.
we planned that. It was planned.
Total plan. Totally planned.
I was
Paid extra for that. I definitely paid extra for that.
So the other one was one of the closers was doing a really good set, and everyone was just laughing hard and loud. And then he said something stupid. I don't even recall what it was, but he lost the entire crowd. I was leaning up against the back wall, and I said, "Oh, this is going to be interesting." He just smiled, and he stepped off the stage, walked over, picked up one of my stools, put it back on the stage, climbed on top of the stool, took his microphone cord, wrapped it around his neck, and says, "Can someone kick the chair out from under me?" And he brought the whole crowd like, "Yeah!" The last one was, as everyone's coming in just before 8 o'clock for the thing, it gets really crowded, and this woman comes flying in by herself. She was probably late 30s, and dressed nicely, and she had thigh-high, bright red stripper boots on. And I was just like, what am I going to do with this? And just to break the tension, I said, "So what do you do for work?" And she goes, "I'm a nurse. I'm a damn good nurse. You should thank me. I fucking save people's lives." And I was like, okay. And I got her a beer, and I let her move along, and I turned around.
Hello, nurse.
So I go to the comics. They were huddled up over in the corner, and I said, stripper boots, that's your target. And I gave her the background. And so the opener, he comes walking down. Before he can hit the stage, she's already heckling him. He jumps on stage, looks at her, and goes, are you the batshit fucking crazy nurse that everyone's talking about? She didn't miss a beat, and she fired back. His 10-minute opener was a screaming match with the two of them, and everyone was just crying, laughing.
Wow.
So good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Crowd work is fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yep.
I got, just looking at what we got here, I got pro wrestling to close out the show.
Pro wrestling. So there's an organization in Central Jersey called UWA, and they do professional wrestling. They're kind of the warm-up league to the WWE. And so, again, they need ring time. So the fight promoter reached out to us and said, you'd be interested in doing wrestling out in the beer garden? And we have the space for it. And so we said, yeah. So we signed a contract for them. They came day of. It was middle summer. It was a ticketed event because we had to put down some money for that. And they built the ring and set up. And we were still early in the day. And this guy comes walking in. And my wife and I were sitting at this table, having lunch. And this guy who was dressed nicely in his 30s, my wife kind of looked and goes, oh, he's cute. And about an hour and a half later, she sees him half naked, greased up, beating the crap out of another guy in the ring. And I turned to my wife and I said, am I still okay? She goes, yeah, you're okay. But I mean, it was fantastic. They had the ring built up there, and they started, with the early people, and then they built themselves up to the championship. A couple of the guys came in politely and said, hey, can we borrow a couple kegs? I was like, sure, why? I said, so we can hurt each other. One of the bad guys was in the ring, and he accidentally fell out of the ring and ran under the tent to hide. And the hero jumped out of the ring, walked up to this lady she was sitting in a lawn chair, and he goes, ma'am, can I borrow your chair for a minute? Walked over and beat the crap out of him with the chair.
That's
amazing.
peak entertainment.
And then
Yes, it is.
the championship bout, my wife and I were standing out back watching, and the evil guy points at us and goes, are you the owner? I said, yeah. He says, you screwed up. And I'm like, oh, no. I have no idea what he's talking about. And I said, oh, no. He says, you didn't read the contract. If I win this champion match, I own the brewery. And I go, oh, no. And then this chanting from the crowd, save the brewery, save the brewery. And the match went on for like 15 minutes. And I finally went and got a half-barrel keg, and I gave it to the hero. And he beat the guy to death with the keg.
Oh, that's amazing.
Saved the brewery. It was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great storyline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I want to thank Steve again before we wrap up, and I also want to tell everybody that's listening, come visit Invertase here in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. Try some of the beer. There is plenty to try. I have yet to have a bad beer here. I've yet to have a questionable beer here. Anything that even leans in that direction. Come check it out. Whether you're coming by plane or train or automobile, you can get here and you're going to have an experience. Come talk to Steve. He's got many more stories that he would love to tell you. I know he loves to talk to those that come and visit. We're just happy to be here and hear Steve's story. And I have to mention this before we go. If you like to play pinball, there are some great pinball machines out here right around where we're sitting. I'm seeing Star Wars, South Park, and Game of Thrones right off the bat. So,
And we'll be doing tournaments in June on pinball.
Oh, tournaments.
But yes, if you're coming, please bring stories so I can learn your secret stories, and then we can use them for another podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, Steve, that it's been amazing to meet you, and you're a true storyteller, and that is just the most fun to get to meet people like yourself and to be able to hear everybody else's stories, but through your eyes. And thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us today.
Thank you.
absolutely.
It was fun.
All right, one more button.
Stellar Sip.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.
Today's boozy quote comes from baseball legend Babe Ruth. who said, "Sometimes when I reflect on all the beer I drink, I feel ashamed, and then I look into the glass and think about the workers in the brewery and all of their hopes and dreams. If I didn't drink this beer, they might be out of work and their dreams would be shattered. Then I think, it is better to drink this beer and let their dreams come true than be selfish and worry about my liver." Would you like to suggest something for us to drink? Give us some feedback or have your brand featured on Matt and Friends Drink the Universe? We would love to hear from all of our listeners. Please check our episode descriptions down below for links to send us a text, support the podcast, and visit our merch store. To keep up with our latest news or share your stellar sips with us, please like and follow Matt and Friends DTU on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and Reddit. For more information about the podcast and links to all of our episodes, please visit www.mattandfriendsdtu.com. That's mattandfriendsdtu.com. Cheers, friends.